Have you ever wondered why some public transport content creators on YouTube get so big, even though they are not necessarily the most qualified or even qualified at all to be talking about public transports like matters in any particular city or country per se? It all boils down to two things: their content and their audience. So even though most of his content primarily focuses around a certain region, like North America, for example, but people like him also used to have like a lot of international viewers, followers as well, because their content just so happens to appeal to the masses, the international masses, which would explain this part. And because his content plays into the low attention span of layman people, and in this context, people who pose as transport enthusiasts but are in reality just urbanists or new urbanists in general. They don't have very, very specific content knowledge when it comes to like buses or trains or any other mode of transport within a particular city other than their own. And also the fact that these people only like public transit because politically and also like environmentally it's green. These are often also the same groups of people that support the electrification of like land transport in general, like vehicles in general, and then yet every single time they become two-faced and then they say, no, we must wipe out all other forms of transport and only rely on electrified railways. Like it has to be the one and only solution that people can commute using. But essentially, these people only like public transport because it's green. And it's not because they really cherish each and every single vehicle, be it a bus or a train, like real transport enthusiasts do. But I think nowadays people struggle to tell the difference between this group of people and this group of people. In short, these people only like it simply for the fact that, oh, it's environmentally friendly, and these people, they truly love their buses and trains or any other type of vehicle. In fact, I would even lump in car enthusiasts into this category as well, because cars are vehicles as well. And cars are technically transport enthusiasts because a car is a mode of transportation, be it your private car or like, a taxi or car sharing. It's still a form of transport, and therefore they are technically transport enthusiasts. Which is why internationally there is this like distinction between transport enthusiasts and transit enthusiasts. It's just that outside of Singapore, and I think outside of Japan as well, they tend to say transit as opposed to public transport. It's like they say public transit as opposed to public transport. Even though both of them are technically interchangeable, it's just that transit just so happens to be more widely used because transit, if I'm not mistaken, technically doesn't include cars, which is what this group of people, they really, really hate. So again, real enthusiasts and posers just for the environment, trying to push their like go green agenda, often at the expense of people's livelihoods. But the one thing that I have to say is that it's not like as if this guy is just was just making content, because now he's retired. It's not like this guy was just making content for the sake of these people. The truth is, no. It's actually the opposite way around. They just so happen to get attracted to his videos. And since this guy was a full-time YouTuber, he saw it as a source of income, like a good opportunity to earn money. Full-time YouTuber, not like a part-time YouTuber with a day job or something along those lines. So often at times, like, they might see it as like, oh, even the bad people or the misguided people are also a form of money. So I would rather, have them as my audience. I mean, according to them, at least. So again, it's not like he is like specifically catering towards this group of people, but it's more of like they just so happen to be attracted to his videos that satisfy them. Because the truth is, there are very, very few content creators that they make good money and they make good content at the same time. And usually that only applies to like people who used to be experts in their relevant industries or are still experts like right now in whatever field. Like it could be something like baking, for example. And because of this fact that very few of them are actual industry experts, sometimes, to put it simply, when making money is the priority, you would tend to focus on this as opposed to this. Any sort of audience that you could have, they're just like, oh, I'm gonna keep them as my audience. And honestly, I don't really blame them for doing so. And more often than not, they happen to play into this kind of thing known as euphemism. You could look up the definition of it, but it's basically, okay, here's how it works normally. So like, let's say this guy starts talking about Singapore's public transport, and then a lot of the unsuspecting viewers, they are just like, hey, my country is being mentioned. I'm so proud of my own transport system, and I hope more people could be proud of it as well. So even though this guy made mistakes in his own explanations, regardless of whether it's like width or like content depth, like whichever the case is, even if they make mistakes, in this case, like the Singapore's transport enthusiasts, they would be like, oh, this guy's from like North America, please give him a break. It's already good enough that he's trying to showcase Singapore's public transport in a positive light, and we should encourage people to spread positivity online. And then they would be like, I'm just thankful for the fact that like this particular community, like in this sense, Singapore's transport, public transport, I'm just thankful for like any form of representation that we get on a global scale. So even if he makes mistakes, we'll just forgive him because he is a good person. He's trying to spread positivity. Which in another context, it would lead to people like them constantly glorifying public transport from, let's say, Japan without truly understanding the number of issues Japan faces with its like public transport in general. It's like their own local news, they would report it, and then the locals are actually aware of it, but these people, they tend to only talk about the good side of things. Okay, all because of euphemism, because when they have such a large international audience, when so much of their audience is basically full of uneducated, and when I mean uneducated, I mean people who just blindly glaze over anything that's like Japanese in this case, he doesn't want to offend them with the actual facts. And when you have demographics like this, it turns out into inaccurate reporting, only reporting the good side without actually reporting the side that the locals, like the issues that the locals are actually facing, the issues that plague Japanese trains in general. Like you would notice the way he starts like clickbaiting, oh, Japan is like a role model in terms of like railways, even though when it comes to automation, they are falling really behind the times, and when it comes to like technology as well. Yes, on a micro scale, you could interpret it as like, oh, on a micro scale, right, they have all these like genius technology that is like at this station, at this railway line. But when you talk about like a large scale issue per se, Japanese technology when it comes to like buses and trains, let's face it, they tend to be like a little bit outdated, and sometimes a little bit is an understatement. Also, without realizing the fact that Japan, I'm just gonna say this very broadly, they tend to emphasize more on long distance, heavy railway network connectivity, like basically the main lines, as opposed to actual connectivity within like the suburbs, for example, or countryside. Okay, let's just say suburbs. A lot of times, because of density, the discrepancy in density between the city area and the suburb area, Japanese like railways are designed mostly in a way to take people as quickly out of the city as possible. And then there comes like the whole hub spoke thingy, because it just happens to be the most efficient way to transport people in Japan's context, and only in Japan's context, not any other country's context, but Japan's context. So again, in short, it's more of like trying to get people from one general area to another general area fast, as opposed to like really thinking about the connectivity within a city, the connectivity within a suburb, a small town, a rural area, or something along those lines. That often gets underreported or unreported by the masses, except in Japanese local news. Like, automation is a problem. Manpower shortages are also another problem that Japan is like currently facing when it comes to like the bus industry and the railway industry in general. So by no means is Japan technically a role model. I mean, technically you could be envious, and you would like in your mind you would feel like, hey, I really want to replicate Japan's heavy railway network in my own country or my own city. Yeah, you can have thoughts like this, but again, it's just one aspect. It is by no means that, oh, Japan is like a role model or anything. And then he also starts like clickbaiting stuff like, oh, how Yamanote line is like the most important line in the entire Tokyo, when in reality, Yamanote line, they have like they have different alternatives when Yamanote line goes down. If let's say Joban line goes down, the entire northeast doesn't have a way to reach their workplaces in the city at all. And the same thing goes for like if Chuo line and Keio line go down, okay, bye bye. If Sobu line, Keisei line, Keio line go down, bye bye. If Utsunomiya line goes down, bye bye to Gunma. If Utsunomiya line goes down, bye bye to Tochigi. If Takasaki line goes down, bye bye to Gunma. And even Saitama wouldn't be able to commute to work anymore. I mean, unless you are in a part of Saitama that has access to, at the very least, Keihin Tohoku line, which is a local all-stop and not like a skip-stop train service. And if Tokaido line goes down, bye-bye Shizuoka, bye-bye Kanagawa. And if Odakyu line goes down, bye-bye another part of Kanagawa. Because it's like when people gloss over the nature of Yamanote line being local all-stop, being a circular, I mean geographically it's more of like a diamond, but you know, operational pattern wise, technically you could say it's a circle. But because of this, like, oh, you hub spoke from like the heavy lines onto the in-between stations in Yamanote line, because of this kind of like tunnel vision on like, oh, from a heavy line to a first mile, last mile connection in the form of Yamanote line, therefore it is like the most important line in the entire Tokyo, even though there are like many alternatives to Yamanote line in the first place, be it bus or train. And it's not like, oh, the stations that Yamanote line serves are more important than the other stations that Yamanote line doesn't serve. In fact, when it comes to connectivity, right, I would argue that within the city center, technically, Tokyo Metro and Toei are way more important than Yamanote line, okay? Because there is just bigger coverage. It also has got to do with like, oh, what is higher order transit, what is lower order transit, what is like a higher order railway line, and what is a lower order railway line. And because, oh, it's a first mile, last mile, so that's why Yamanote line is the most important, because it's the first mile, last mile. Yes, I get that Yamanote line as a circle, it links up the heavy railway lines together. But even without Yamanote line, we the locals can still survive. It is not the most important line in the entire Tokyo, for example, like in this case. We have other options. We have Tokyo Metro, we have Toei. End of story. So it's about the discrepancy between the issues that locals actually face versus the issues that outsiders perceive that locals face. Because of this discrepancy in how people present their content, yeah, this is why just because a content creator has a lot of subscribers, that doesn't necessarily mean that whatever they say actually makes sense. But to be fair, his channel mostly focused on this as compared to this. So technically it's not his fault. It's more of his audience fault, and basically people not knowing how to differentiate between this or this. And it also happens when subconsciously, whether you are a layman or a real enthusiast, subconsciously you praise him for supposedly sounding knowledgeable. Yeah, it's the same effect. It kind of like gives off the impression that, oh, this guy is like the go-to person when it comes to like transport related issues. But this guy isn't even a local. It's like, why would I listen to a non-local trying to talk about, in this context, Singapore's public transport, when in the first place, said non-local is just a tourist, and it's not like they have lived in this place, in a certain place for like long periods of time to be able to accurately comment on issues. It's like, if I want to learn more about like a certain country's like actual transport network, I would listen to the locals. I wouldn't listen to these kinds of like international people that only focus on content breadth or like width as opposed to focusing in depth about like issues. I wouldn't listen to these like this like international people. I would rather listen to the locals. Simply because the locals just have a better grasp and a better picture of what actually happens on ground, like the ground sentiments and everything. And to extend this conversation, because of the effect of such YouTubers that often get praised by the layman or the urbanists in general, people start to get the impression that in order to become famous on YouTube, you have to title your videos in a certain way. And whilst that is technically like 1% of the equation, again, it's not a full picture, and I'll explain why. And they start to get the impression that they have to follow the typical normie YouTubers, this format of titling their videos. So it's like, the reason why this is usually preferred for like YouTubers that appeal to the masses is because the algorithm tends to favor these types of like very, very general or generic titles as opposed to more specific titles. It's just the way the YouTube algorithm is designed, and it's just the way that it works. It's more of like the titles are aimed to eliminate nuance, and you would compensate it by talking about said nuances in the video instead of like the title. And it's also because this is technically more attention grabbing. But what people fail to understand is that these kinds of titles, it is, how do you say, it's targeted towards the layman, and it's targeted towards like the normie audience, and not necessarily the bus or train enthusiast audience. Because these people, even though they might have like a mild interest or slight interest in like buses or trains or traveling, for example, they're not really like full-fledged enthusiasts by any means. They just like this or that. It's like 私が何々が好き kind of like thing. That's all, but they don't really elaborate. That's because these YouTubers, they already have their own normie audience that they've accumulated from outside of the bus and train scope. And when they happen to do those videos, it gets watched by the normie audience as opposed to like the actual enthusiasts, even though some enthusiasts may actually click on those videos, but most people watching are normies per se. And these kinds of titles are usually targeted towards like normies. And this kind of like format is often used by vloggers, like in real life vloggers, like people who post videos about their raw experiences. It's more of like a diary style kind of like thing, as opposed to like an argumentative video. So once again, these titles are usually made for like casual videos, or it's usually for like IRL, like in real life vloggers, IRL streamers, IRL vloggers who usually show their face. And why do people click on the video when they see a face? It's because they're like, oh, this is not AI. This is like an actual human being. And when there's a human being on screen, I can see their face. I can pretend to have a parasocial relationship with them. It sounds or it looks more genuine, even though that depends on what said YouTuber actually shows. But it's more of like, because there is a human being inside the video, or human beings inside the video, it looks more relatable. And that is the reason why those kinds of videos, they tend to get more clicks. But I have to emphasize this again. These kinds of titles are usually for the vlog or diary style content creators. And it's not just something that's like for like content creators of all kinds to use. This is more appropriate for a certain type of content creator. And then also because of whatever I've just said, some bus and train enthusiasts, they think the way that they will be able to get more clicks and in turn subscribers, because they care about how many subscribers that they manage to accumulate, right? They think that by titling their videos like this, they would automatically drive up engagement. But I'm here to tell you that doing this is very, very, very risky. And you need to be able to have or possess like the content knowledge to be able to explain these things properly, because the moment you title your videos like this, they are not just your viewers are not just gonna expect in-depth explanations about a certain issue. They're gonna be expecting width, breadth, or like coverage in general. You listing down many points, as opposed to just it being in-depth. And in reality, it's not easy to balance between it being in-depth and giving as many relevant points as possible. And when you start to overly focus on how many points you give and not even give a proper detailed explanation of it, like you skimp on the explanations and you just start laundry listing points like in a very AI sloppish manner, then the overall quality of your video would then go down, because instead of just hearing your points, what people want to hear is the elaboration of your points and how is it relevant to what you're the issue that you're trying to talk about in those videos. So compromising on your in-depth explanations, unless you have already explained it to your viewers before, like many times, it has its own drawback. It has its own drawbacks. And like I said, since some people are really concerned with how many subscribers they get, I'm trying to tell you, even if your video ends up hitting the algorithm and many people watch it, that doesn't necessarily mean that your video is like actually quality and the fact that people would actually subscribe to you. They usually only hit subscribe when your points manage to impress them. Like they are impressed with the way you deliver your points. Yeah. Because it's not just about your video being like quote unquote watchable or nice. It's about whether people actually learn stuff from your videos or whether it actually manages to, like, whether you manage to leave a good impression on them or otherwise. But many at times, usually why a lot of people get disillusioned and carried away from doing these videos is that there is no like industry expert out there that has the capacity to actually share and correct the information that you said in the videos. Like there's nobody that possesses a lot of in-depth knowledge to be able to like correct you on the spot. You get more and more carried away with titling your videos very generally like that. And a lot of times you miss the mark on in-depth because you are so focused on giving as many points as possible without even checking whether said points are even relevant to the video in the first place, or whatever you typed. Doesn't necessarily have to be the main points, it could be like the elaboration as well. So in short, the reason why this is risky is because you're not only setting up breadth for your in depth for yourself, you're also setting up breadth as well. Because I would rather, if you just want to focus on one issue in depth, or like myth busting, how long does it truly take from one place to another, I would rather you use a more specific title, unless you really have the confidence to be able to pull it off. So if you ever see me roasting all the stupid kids, it's because they try to clickbait like this and then they don't make their videos worth the clickbait and I get pissed off. So yeah. And then when they clearly haven't done enough research or are not knowledgeable enough to be able to like talk about this topic properly, despite scripting their videos unlike me, yeah, this is why. And if you want the quote-unquote scientific reason as to why this is such a problem, it's because by titling your videos like this as opposed to it being a very specific title, it's because you are crossing over from this territory, the specific niche territory that is often less viewed, into the more viewed territory. So like you're crossing over from a less viewed territory into a more viewed territory, a more in-depth territory to a less in-depth territory, and where people tend to be more demanding per se. You're crossing the gap between specific and general. It naturally becomes more demanding. So basically, this is the effect you get when you title your videos like this. You get this. You have to try to explain an issue that even these people without knowledge or whom may be unsuspecting are able to understand as well. It could also be something like this. For instance, but when you cross the gap between enthusiast and layman, you see how dangerous it can get. And when I mean dangerous, I mean if you don't do it properly, it could backfire on you. Okay, like none of these titles are wrong, but by titling your video like this, you are setting up yourself for more, okay, it's more of like the amount of expectations people will get from your video, it will shoot up. Or even something like, Singapore's like buses and trains are good / bad. You could change the descriptors, but it's like, it's the same thing with this. People would be expecting more out of you, as opposed to giving something that is technically still within bus enthusiast territory. The moment you venture out of it, yeah, people will be expecting more out of you. And this, I don't know how to say it, phenomena or something, this is basically where all the AI slop tends to occur. It's when, especially like, you look at all the bus or train enthusiasts attempting to like explain something. This is exactly how, like the way it happened, how their videos end up becoming AI slop, because they are unaware of this jump in expectations. They think they could do everything that they do in their own comfort zone and bring it to like the wider audience. So this is the problem. They think they could carry whatever they do here onto this scale. Main takeaway is that more general titles are usually more demanding, because like the scope of issues, I mean, that you have to talk about, naturally it becomes larger. And then even if your video gets a lot of views, right? When you don't meet people's expectations, they won't subscribe to you. So it's kind of like you begging people like, oh, thanks for watching my video, can you please don't forget to drop a like and subscribe. When you guys say all of these stuff, right, you're not gonna change people's impression of you, like whether you manage to impress them or not. Saying this because I see a lot of people that are concerned with the number of subscribers they get. They tend to make this mistake. They think, oh, my video has a lot of views and a lot of people agree with me, that kind of thing. And then they naturally complain about why their subscriber count isn't going up. It all boils down to the fact that YouTube tends to prefer more generic titles as opposed to specific titles. It's like between niche or general. YouTube generally prefers general titles. It's kind of like, you would soon realize that, right? Yes, there are people who like stand out amongst the crowd, but you would then soon realize that actually the people that accumulate the most subscribers, the reason is not always because, oh, they are expertise and people generally look up to them for their expertise. It's more so that it's more of the fact that the top YouTubers, they know how to garner people's attention and they know how to tailor their content to the masses. They produce videos that the masses like to watch. Not just from like a specific group of people, but they tend to produce videos that, you know, people with attention span issues, like just, you know what I mean by the masses, right? I mean like people who are generic, who are normies, who just want to consume generic normie content that even though it's stupid, but it appeals to like the masses, right? Yeah. That is why it's not like the best reason to explain, but that is why sometimes ironically generic content does better on YouTube. But remember, the more generic your titles get, the more demanding it gets. Like the amount of work you have to do in order to actually make said video a success. Simply because the masses are watching you. It's not just public transport enthusiasts that are watching you. So the actual advice that I can give you as to, you know, when to go general, it depends on everybody's like strengths and weaknesses. If you have a lot to talk about, if it's your area of expertise, by all means, go ahead, as long as you understand that people would be expecting more out of you. But if not, please, like, so that, you know, you don't underwhelm people with your videos, please stick to this instead, unless you're really comfortable stepping outside your comfort zone. I mean, I tend to be more conservative because of this, in the sense that like, I know what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. I know when to step out and I know when to take a step back. But I guess the only difference between me is that I clearly show people what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. So people know, and people know how to raise or lower their own expectations of me based on what I'm actually comfortable with. You get what I mean? For example, people know that trains are not my expertise, but that doesn't stop me from talking about trains. This video is more of like showing you the actual thought process that goes into making the videos. It's like, it is a proper video, but it's all the raw thought process that a lot of YouTubers tend to cut out in order to make their videos look more perfect and look nicer in general, and also to cater to people's like low attention span in general. But the whole unscripted part about me, it's more of like, it's giving you my entire thought process to it's like without filter, to let people know, hey, I'm not a fake. What am I actually good at and what am I actually not good at? And this video is one good example of me kind of struggling to explain certain things properly, taking more time than I actually need. Whereas I went a little bit general with this. I went a little bit general with this without going too far, because I have clearly identified the issues in which the reason why some people, their video, no matter how much effort they put into it, it just for some reason doesn't stand out. So I've identified like pretty much all the reasons, and then I consolidated them into one video, two videos, and then now the third video is this one. But yeah, specific. This one, I went into a little bit more general. Specific. This one is more of like a mix of specific and general. Specific. All of these are specific. This one is general. When I make titles like this, technically, I could erase the sum distance times speed formula thingy and just say how public transport bloggers try to gaslight the masses. But for me, I know when I want to make my titles more specific and when I want to make my titles more generic. So, I mean, that's the thing. But overall, this video is still kind of like generic. I'm talking about specifics, but the marketing is still very general per se. So depends on what you're good at, and it also depends on your own confidence per se. Because I wasn't like, I didn't know, because it's unscripted, right? I didn't know how well or badly this video would turn out, since it's a not scripted attempt like I usually do. So in the end, I decided not to make this general, because I was like, nah, I think this video turned out like shit. I'm gonna keep it specific, because I don't really want the... It's not that I care about my reputation or anything. I have never cared about my reputation. It's more of like, if I deep down know that a video isn't well done or isn't good, I will put it out there, but it's like more of like, people could clearly tell that this is not my best work, and I want to show it very, very clearly what is not my best work, and which videos are those that I am way more confident in. Again, to keep it short, it's more of like, I know when to take a step back and when to actually try to grab attention. You get what I mean? Because the number one mistake that most content creators make, like for buses and trains, is that every single time they're always clickbaiting, they're always looking for attention. But the truth is, you need to know when to do what, that kind of thing. But obviously, whatever I said, it still ultimately depends on your strengths and weaknesses, or what your channels are even all about in the first place. It doesn't apply to everybody necessarily. This is only more relevant to people who do explanation videos per se, because explanation videos are like, I would prefer that you try to brush up on your overall content knowledge before even attempting to do like these sorts of like content explanation videos in the first place. Because if not, right, like, it's going to turn out very amateurish, in the sense that people could tell that even though you strip your videos, you didn't have a lot of content knowledge in the first place. Like, you're not even confident about what you're trying to explain. And I only say this because I do show people like my raw thought processes in those videos, but a lot of YouTubers tend to cut it out in an attempt to make their videos nicer, and I don't blame them. It's all part of the learning process. It's just who is more comfortable showing their weaknesses to people, and who genuinely needs more time to gain the confidence to tell people what they're good at and what they are not good at. So it depends on people, but I only say this because I do understand that not everybody is confident enough to be able to say, oh, I'm good at this, I'm not good at this.